Welcome back to It's Too Late to Apologize Book Reviews. I'm Stella, and today I want to talk about dystopians. Sometimes I wonder why they're even called dystopians. I think a more apt name is speculative fiction, because life is actually an ongoing dystopia. If you're not living in one, you're just not looking at the whole picture. Just step back, get a better view of the joint, and you'll see there's probably some dystopia somewhere. Utopia just doesn't exist, and one day I'll finish reading Aldous Huxley's Island, which is supposed to be the counterpoint to A Brave New World, which I'll be talking about in just a minute. But one person's utopia is just another person's dystopia, after all. Just so you know, there will be spoilers in this. You've been warned. So this is going to be a battle between three dystopian novels and how they differ from one another and how they're similar to one another. Let's get the similarities out of the way. All three books are about a distant future where the government keeps tight control on their citizens in various ways. I mean, that's the definition of a dystopia. First up is the novel We, written by Yevgeny Zamyatin in 1920 and translated from Russian to English in 1924. The main character of this novel is D503. He's a project engineer for building Spaceship Integral, which is planned to conquer extraterrestrial planets for the one state. D503 goes along with his lot in life until he struggles to overcome his attraction to I-330, a woman who refuses to conform as he has. He finds himself both repelled and fascinated by her. He begins to have dreams, which disturbs him, as dreams are thought to be a symptom of mental illness. Slowly, I-330 reveals to D503 that she is involved with the MEFI, an organization plotting to bring down the one state, and forms of civil dissent increase because of them. In his last journal entry, D503 indifferently relates that he has been forcibly tied to a table and subjected to the Great Operation, which has recently been mandated for all citizens of the one state in order to prevent possible riots. Having been psychosurgically refashioned into a state of mechanical reliability, they, as in the people of We, would now function as tractors in human form. This operation removes the imagination and emotions by targeting parts of the brain with X-rays. Meanwhile, the MEFI uprising gathers strength and people start committing acts of social revolt. Although D503 expresses hope that reason shall be restored, the novel ends with uncertainty about the one state's survival. During the whole novel, there's this sort of mantra that D503 toys with, but also I-330 talks about, and that is that there's just no highest number. There can be no final revolution. That there is no end. That revolution is continuous. Up next is A Brave New World, written by Aldous Huxley in 1931. This book follows the lives of Lenina, a hatchery worker who is popular and desired by the men in her caste. Bernard, who is a psychologist, but who is shorter than most men and so develops an inferiority complex about it. And John, a man who grew up sort of wild outside the world state, even though his parents are both from there. Citizens are engineered through artificial wombs and childhood indoctrination programs into predetermined classes based on intelligence and labor are used. Bernard, through his work, understands and disapproves of society's methods of keeping its citizens peaceful, which includes their constant consumption of a soothing, happiness-producing drug called soma. Bernard's only friend is Helmholtz Watson, a gifted writer who finds it difficult to use his talents creatively in their pain-free society. How typical of a writer. So Bernard takes a holiday with Lenina outside the world state to a reservation in New Mexico, which the two observe natural-born people, disease, the aging process, other languages, and religious lifestyles for the first time. They find it gross, but they encounter Linda, a woman originally from the world state who is living on the reservation with her son John, who is now a young man. She too visited the reservation years ago, but became separated from her group and left behind. Despite spending his whole life on the reservation, John has never been accepted by the villagers, and his and Linda's lives have been hard and unpleasant. Linda wants to return to London, and John wants to see this brave new world. On their return to London with John, Bernard is now treated as a celebrity by the highest members of society and revels in attention he once disparaged. But Bernard's popularity is fleeting. Linda spends all of her time using soma, while John refuses to attend social events, appalled by what he perceives to be an empty society. Lenina and John are physically attracted to each other, but John's view of courtship and romance is based on Shakespearean writings and is utterly incompatible with Lenina and the world state's freewheeling attitude towards sex. John is informed that his mother is on her deathbed, and it's assumed it's from consuming too much soma. Bernard and John are told that they are to be exiled for antisocial activity. Bernard pleads for a second chance, even though he's told exile is actually a reward. The land for exiles is full of the most interesting people in the world, individuals who do not fit into the social model of the world state. Jaded with his new life, stricken with remorse, and hounded by the media, the novel ends with John committing suicide. And then lastly but not least is 1984 by George Orwell, published in 1949. The protagonist is Winston Smith, an outer party member who secretly hates the party and dreams of rebellion. He begins a forbidden relationship with a colleague, Julia, and starts to remember what life was like before the party came to power. 1984 centers on the consequences of totalitarianism, mass surveillance, perpetual war, and repressive regimentation of behavior within society, resulting in the demise of freedom of expression. It also examines the role of truth and facts within politics and the ways in which they are manipulated to coerce and control the population. Winston and Julia are captured, and over several months they are starved and tortured to cure them from their insanity. It's revealed to Winston that the party seeks power for its own sake. But Winston holds on to the fact that the party has not managed to make him betray his feelings for Julia, and this will be his great victory over the party, even though he accepts the party's invincibility and its principles. But the party knows Winston's greatest fear, meaning their surveillance of him is even more pervasive than he ever thought possible, and by using it against him, he willingly betrays Julia by wishing the suffering upon her instead. Winston is released back into public life. Love and will are destroyed, and Winston loves Big Brother. So why even compare these books at all? These books and authors were all fascinating to read for several different reasons this video is much too short to get into. If I had to choose which novel I preferred the characters and style of writing of, it would be 1984. But if I had to choose which made me think more and illustrated the West dystopia best, I think it would go to A Brave New World. But make no mistake that We probably inspired both works, definitely 1984 at least, as Orwell admitted to himself, while other writers suspected that Huxley was inspired by We, but he eventually denied. In 1984, control of the citizenry is tight-fisted, extensive surveillance is used, and physical force is expended. To a lesser extent, this is true of We as well. I don't remember witnessing the physical cruelty of that society as much as 1984. Maybe I'm wrong? Let me know if I am. In We, control is used mostly as an extension of logic. Logic is the weapon, but you will disappear and be operated on if you don't fall into line. I find this frightening because D503 is happy in his life of order, and this is a pernicious thought. Of course, order is necessary for society to thrive. That's obvious, and makes the argument that more order would mean better results, more safety, more prosperity for all. And that right there is a pernicious and scary and relevant thought right now. In We, everyone wakes up at the same time, eats at the same time, chews their food at the same time to the rhythm of a metronome. They even allot a time for sex on everyone's schedule as it seemed as a mechanical need as opposed to a form of deep connection between people. Everyone's day is scheduled to the last second in order to maximize productivity. There is no individuality, no I, which is where the name comes from. We, not I. Well, that's frightening. But in A Brave New World, control is obtained through hedonism and pleasure. The one state controlled its people by encouraging them to be obsessed with attaining social status, abolishing parenthood, encouraged promiscuity, and offered soma to anyone feeling anxious, stressed, or unhappy. I don't know about you, but that feels pretty darn eerie to me. In an introduction to A Brave New World, it's quoted, Huxley used the setting and characters in his science fiction novel to express widely felt anxieties, particularly the fear of losing individuality, identity, in the fast-paced world of the future. An early trip to the United States gave A Brave New World much of its character. Huxley was outraged by the culture of youth, commercial cheeriness, and sexual promiscuity, and the inward-looking nature of many Americans. He had also found the book My Life and Work by Henry Ford on the boat to America, and he saw the book's principles applied in everything he encountered after leaving San Francisco. There are many similarities between 1984 and We. The two books mirror each other a lot. But We comes across a bit lightheartedly comparatively, which seems at odds with its themes. In We, I think D503 has synesthesia, where colors impart feelings and other things, and people resemble letters. According to translator Randall, Zamyatin told artist Yuri Anenkov of qualities he ascribed to certain sounds and letters. And from Zimyatin's 1920 essay on language, if you try to follow the language of thought in your own mind, you will not find even the simplest of sentences. Only shreds, fragments of simple sentences. Only the most essential elements of a sentence are used. Sometimes only a verb, or only an epithet, an object. At first glance, this assertion may seem paradoxical. Why should fragments of sentences scattered as after an explosion have greater effect on the reader than some thoughts and images arranged in regular, steady marching ranks? Because you meet the reader's natural instinctive needs. You do not compel him to skim. And you definitely find this in his writing in We. It's very fragmented and stream of consciousness at times. There are sentence fragments, but the story is told through diary entries in D503's journal, so it feels very intimate at times. And it's true, you can't skim. You will miss a lot if you do. The fragments demand attention. These three novels are about fearing the removal of individuality, but I find this in conflict with Huxley's view of Americans becoming too inward-looking. That kind of seems to oppose each other, in a sense. What do you think? But We has some interesting ideas about the fear of infinity, or infinite revolutions, which is a philosophical debate D503 has with I330. So in this section, they're both speaking to each other and are debating this. So D says, "This is pointless. This is ridiculous. Isn't it clear to you yet? You are starting what is called a revolution." And I says back to him, "Yes, a revolution. Why is it ridiculous?" Ridiculous because revolutions aren't possible, because I'm talking, not you, our revolution was the last, and there cannot be any more revolutions. Everyone knows that. My sweet, you are a mathematician. More than that, you are a philosopher of mathematics. So then, tell me, what is the final number? I don't understand. Which final number? Well, the last number, the highest, the biggest. But I330, that is ridiculous. The number of numbers is infinite. Which final one do you want? Which final revolution do you want then? There isn't a final one. Revolutions are infinite. Final things are for children because infinity scares children, and it is important that children sleep peacefully at night. But what is the point? Whatever is the point in all of this? For the benefactor's sake, what can the point be if everyone is already happy? Let's suppose. Well, okay then, say you're right. Then what comes next? How funny. A perfectly childish question. Tell a child something, explain it completely to the very end, and they will always ask without fail, what happens next? Why? Children are the only brave philosophers, and brave philosophers are, inevitably, children. And that's just it. We must always think like children. With their what happens next. Nothing happens next, period. Throughout the universe, all over, uniformly distributed. Uniform, all over. That's exactly it. Entropy. Psychological entropy. To you, to a mathematician, isn't it clear that it's the differences between temperatures? It's in their thermal contrast that lies life. And if everywhere, throughout the whole universe, there are bodies of equal warmness or equal coldness, you have to bang them together to create fire, explosion, inferno, and that's what we're doing, banging things together. But I330, come on, don't you see? Our ancestors did exactly that at the time of the 200 Years' War. Oh, and they were right. They were 1,000 times right. They made only one mistake. Afterward, they believed that there was the final number, which doesn't exist in the natural world. It just doesn't. Their mistake was the mistake of Galileo. He was right that the Earth moves around the sun, but he didn't know that the whole solar system itself moves around some other center. He didn't know that the real, not the relative orbit of Earth is not just a naive circle. That's a really interesting thought. If there is no differential, there is no Big Bang, there is no life. There's a lot in there to unpack. So have you read any of these books? What are your thoughts? Did you find that one is more eerie or closer describes the dystopia of the world that we are living in right now? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.